Thanks, Chriselle. Hey, everybody. So we've got an exciting topic to share with you. Freemium, friend or foe. And the honest truth is, maybe 5 years ago, this was like a buzzword and something that people were all excited about and didn't necessarily know what it was. But now it's kind of an established fact of life for a lot of companies. And, it's not just a buzzword, it's something that is really driving business now. And I am so privileged to have a great group of people to discuss this with you. I'm going to lob some questions at my fellow panelists, and then we're going to open up questions for you so we make this truly participatory. So let's get going on freemium, starting with David Barrett, the founder and CEO of Expensify, a self-proclaimed wine aficionado and all-around alpha geek.
That's right.
Come on up, David. Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And I'm also going to call to the stage Jules Maltz, general partner who joined IVP, the venture capital firm, in 2008 with over 10 years of venture capital experience in things like Buddy Media, Checker, Dropbox, Indigo, NerdWallet, Slack, Zendesk, and Zenefits. Please welcome Jules.
Thanks. I feel like we're like a dating show.
And last but not least, Zig Serafin, the COO of Qualtrics, recently relocated here to beautiful Utah. Come on up, Zig. And just a little bit of Zig's background. He ran Office 365 and Skype for Business at Microsoft. He helped spearhead the development of Microsoft's AI technology and has quite a bit of experience in freemium. So before we get started, let me just survey you guys. So how many people here are from a B2B company? B2B, okay, that's pretty good, maybe 50%. How about B2C, a consumer-facing company? Okay, good. Any e-commerce types of folks? Good, good. Oh, wow, this is a nice representation. Any mobile-first, mobile-only app companies? Great. Oh, look, we can talk about it all. This is awesome. So the first thing we're going to do is just set definitions, get that straight, and then dive right into the conversation. So by freemium, do we all agree, we can debate this if we need to, is give something of value away for free in order to charge for a value-added service or product later. Does that all make sense? You guys good with that?
Sure.
You guys good with that?
Sure.
Okay, so with that, I just want to poll my fellow panelists here. Without talking about your own product or something you've invested in, what's your favorite freemium product? David.
So I was thinking about this. There's this app for San Francisco public transportation that's called, I think, Quickie. I don't remember the name. It's this very small app. It's completely free. What I love about it is I've bought the thing so many times with different phones, and every time it just asks, it's like, hey, it's completely free, but if you want to, would you like to buy me a beer? And there's like 3 plans. One is like the can of beer plan, or there's the pitcher, or there's the keg. And I've gone for I probably buy this guy about 5 pitchers of beer, I think. And that's like, I would have never spent any of this money had it been upfront, but I just depend upon the app so much that now I'm a big fan.
Cool, and it's called?
It's Quickie, Q-U-I-C-A-Q-I, I think.
All right, we'll check that out. Jules?
So we're in a bunch, with Dropbox and Slack, and then even on the consumer side with Supercell. The one that we haven't invested in that I still just love is a company called MailChimp out in Atlanta. An incredible business, very profitable, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in the email marketing space. So that was going to be my answer, but then I did some research and I realized that actually Amazon Web Services is technically a freemium business because you can use AWS for free up to a point. Can't really build a business on it, but that's got to be probably the most incredible company, and so they're also freemium as well.
Cool. Zig?
It's a public company called Atlassian, and they own a variety of different products. Anybody used Jira before? I'm sure there's a number of you.
Yeah.
They do a really great job of knowing who their audience is. They pull you in, you start populating artifacts into it that give you a reason to come back. I think they do an excellent job in how they pull other value in, whether it's their own value or whether it's third party, what you would think of as an application marketplace, but it doesn't show up that way necessarily. It's in the context of what you're trying to do. And you started off with free, and pretty soon you're paying. And you're paying on behalf of your company sometimes.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Lots and lots of Jira users, for sure. I will be a little boring, but hopefully helpful. One day I woke up, and half of my 10,000 photographs were gone from iCloud. And they were also deleted on my phone. It kind of sucks. I was not happy. So I switched to Google Photo. And it's been spectacularly wonderful, unlimited storage, unless you want full resolution images saved. And it's like, who doesn't want full resolution images saved? So that's what I got with Google Photos. So that's pretty much my favorite, given the pain I went through. Okay, Jules, I'm going to start with you because you were brave enough, like almost 10 years ago, to write about the freemium model. And this is what you said about the perfect freemium product. I love this. The perfect freemium product will market itself, acquire new users, both free and paid, onboard users, automate customer service, all with little or no human intervention at minimal expense. I'm like out of breath reading that whole description. So that's a pretty tall order. Like, in your opinion, what companies have like pulled that like perfect tall order off?
Yeah, well, I mean, Atlassian, Dropbox, Slack, I think a lot of the companies that are the successful freemium companies, Expensify, I'm sure, and David can talk about that too, but a lot of the companies realize that if you're going to go freemium, it's actually a very dangerous thing, right? Because you're offering your product and service for free. So inherently, that can't be a product or service that requires a ton of customer support for those free users. It has to be something that someone can easily onboard themselves, they can sign up for. They don't need a lot. And then it's also got to be something that there is value to converting to paid, right? Because if you just acquire a bunch of free users that never pay you at all, it's not a good business. And so I think actually having a distinction between users, which is someone that joins your service for free, and customers, someone who pays you, is really important. Your end goal is to get as many customers as possible. And freemium is a really good tool to use when you have a product that's a horizontal that can touch a ton of potential customers or employees. It's easy to use, and it can be basically, you don't need all that marketing or really hand-holding or complexity. Terrible products for freemium are ones that are massively complex, like you would never sell Workday as a freemium product. It takes a long time to implement. So there's a lot of things that doesn't make sense for freemium, but if you've got a really simple, easy product, I think freemium can be a great tool, but just remember that the only goal in being a freemium company is to end up with customers, and so you have to build a product that basically allows people to become customers a lot faster.
So I would actually challenge that kind of last statement about Workday being sold in a freemium manner. Expensify is an incredibly sophisticated tool, and it's like really complicated because it's solving a very complicated problem. And so most would think that it'd be impossible to sell our product in a freemium fashion just because of we were integrated into your accounting solution, your bank account, and all sort of stuff. But no, it absolutely works. I think that it requires a lot of creativity, and you certainly have to approach it with a mindset that recognizes that a lot of the classic enterprise sales strategies don't work. But I don't know that actually even hard products can't be sold in a freemium manner with the right creative mindset.
Yeah, but there's no implementation though, right? Like you don't have a multiple month implementation with
That's not true at all.
Expensify.
I mean, like we're tapped into, like we were connected to more of the ERP than any other product in your stack. We connect to your accounting system, your CRM, your payroll. We're in your bank accounts, in your personal bank accounts. We're in everything. And so I'd say, no, we actually have one of the most sophisticated backend integrations, and we still do it in a freemium manner.
But no professional services.
No professional services fee. It's $9 per active user per month. Yep. But the only way you ever pay is if you get active. Yeah. And you get active after you deploy. And so we actually make no money during the deployment process whatsoever. And so no, I was saying it is possible.
We're going to get into a heated debate about COGS here in a second. But let's talk about cost for a second. So in your definition here of the perfect product, you say minimal expense. So any guidelines any of you have in terms of, okay, if you're gonna go freemium, because it's kind of like people get excited about freemium and they think it's hot and they think it's just gonna light their business model on fire, and they might not do the whole P&L exercise. Any guidelines on what to look for in terms of profit margins before you do that? Like what should you have gotten your cost to serve down to before you're like really comfortable? Is there any kind of a range or guidepost in that, or do you just go for it? Like what's the deal?
I'm not a numbers guy, I just go for it.
You go for it, and then worry about the cost later.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you sort of go forward and you figure it out as you go, and it's all about like, do you want to be sort of the Microsoft of your category or the Apple of your category? Microsoft, you could try to serve an okay product to everyone, and that's one strategy. But we view it as we're a premium product. We're more expensive than the competition, unabashedly so, because we want to go after the best part of the market and capture all of the best part of the market, and we don't actually really care about all of the market. And so I think that if you're a premium product going after customers that appreciate your solution, that means they're actually not going to come to you with crazy requests because they actually are coming to you. Like, we don't do any advertising. It's 100% inbound. There's no outbound calling whatsoever. So we're only talking to people who already want what we have. And so that means we don't get distracted by a huge range of sort of one-off requests and so forth. And I'd say, now, none of this strategy would have worked had we sort of had a clear vision from the start. But I think it's all about just allowing yourself to be pulled forward into the parts of the market that are working, even if everyone says it can't work.
David, you raised a really interesting point. I mean, margins are a function of cost and revenue. And so what's interesting to me about what you just said is that you were so confident that you could give something away for free and still command high value and high price on the back end, that you weren't so worried about margins, which is a really nice position to be in. But Zig, I know you've seen this equation both from the earlier stage company as well as later stage, working at Microsoft, bringing Skype into the fold, working on the 365 strategy, moving Office online, all that kind of stuff. How much debate and how much consideration do you have to give to the free model as it pertains to price? Is that something that you guys had to struggle with?
Yeah, there's no one size fits all answer on it. It's very, it depends upon the product that you're in, the category you're going after. Is the value proposition something that's already pre-established? Or are you doing something new that you're wanting to get people to start using your product experience? In fact, the value of usage is tremendous. If you can actually start to get people to come in and pre-populate content or information within the product, if they can even take the step to start to enlist other people to want to start to participate in the experience, that's gold. You can't, you will, any day of the month, you will trade that off for the next dollar you might spend on just raw marketing costs, as an example, because you're learning about patterns and capabilities and things that people are doing in your product, presuming that you've actually thought through what it takes to be able to capture that information. Like, have you instrumented your system from day one to be able to use that as a source of knowledge in order to be able to know where people go next, and then start thinking about what are the value triggers, and some people call them paywalls, but where are the places where you actually end up getting people to start to use the product? How long did it take them to do so, to discover that value? And then what's all the crap that's in the middle that you need to get out that keeps them from actually discovering that, right? So when you think about the cost, it's actually really, what does it take to be able to how much investment does it take to be able to do the right things? Often it's removing things that might be getting in the way of discovering the core value of your product or of your experience. And then you start thinking through things like, okay, so what's my lifetime value possibility of this particular potential subscriber? How do I think of that in terms of customer acquisition costs? Like, what got them there in the first place to be able to start trialing my product, right? And then you start thinking about cost of serving. Is that, are those issues on COGS? Is it having to do with the way that you architected your product? Does it have to do with ongoing marketing that you need to do that may or may not be in product as part of it? So it's a variety of factors, and it isn't one size fits all. You sort of have to think that through. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to usage. That's what you're really going after. And then you say, how much usage will trump cost given the value of what happens when you start to get people down your funnel and start to become a part of your life cycle?
Let's focus on that a second, because in my experience, that issue of what do you leave in and what do you take out of the free offer in order to get that usage, in order to get that network effect that Matt Kohler was talking about earlier, so that the value is apparent. But by the same token, you haven't taken away the incentive to pay. Like, what are some examples in your experience? I'd love all of you to address this, of like that perfect balance between providing enough value in the free offering without pulling the rug out from under the paid offering. Jules, what have you seen in your portfolio that's really struck that balance?
Yeah, I think Slack's done a really good job of basically using that free offering as a way to drive faster adoption of Slack within enterprises, and then those people ultimately pay. And so, Slack's a product where you can sign up, and actually, everybody in this room could join a Slack channel together and not pay Slack any money. But if you're actually got a company, you want to have, you have all this company messages back and forth. You really want an archive of that information. You want to be able to search what someone said in Slack 6 months or a year ago. You can't do that unless you pay.
So is Slack's model purely focused on the value add to get you to pay toward the IT folks, or is it also toward the end user?
To the users. What's really cool, we've been using Slack at IVP for, even before we made the investment for the last few years, and we use it as a repository of almost like the intelligence or brain of our firm. I can go back and look at a conversation we had about a company from a year and a half ago, or I could look at different
so
things.
So that searchability and that archivability, that accrues to you as a user.
It's huge, and you only get that if you pay, right? You can do some, limited kind of the last 6 months or last kind of few months of messages, but I think that's a huge differentiator. And then Slack's also adding in, administrative tools for the IT department, the ability to wipe accounts if someone leaves the firm, the ability to do single sign-on or integrations there. And so I think that's one of the values they're layering on. But I think there's only really two reasons to have free users, right? And the first reason is you want a free user because you think that individual will ultimately become a future customer, someone who pays you, right? And the second reason to have a free user is because you think that person will invite somebody, or through their usage of their product, will tell somebody who will eventually become a customer. And I know you have some experience at Skype, but Skype had probably a ton of free users that Skype knew would never pay them, but they were constantly communicating with people who would. And so fostering that community is huge for the ultimate success of the business. But if you know they're never going to become a customer and they're never going to help you find new customers, you shouldn't be serving.
Yeah. David, I was fascinated learning more about your strategy with Expensify. I just love the fact that you're enabling, everyday people to go out, download your app, and start tracking their expenses without any back end to get going, right? Just with the free account. And so how do you think about those users versus the person who pays? And what's the relationship between those? Because they're different in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
right?
and I think actually mentioning the two different audiences is a really key factor. And I think that the way we see it is the vast majority of our users will never pay us, but they will create the enthusiasm for the paying customers. So I doubt there are many accountants in this room. There might be some, but the vast majority of us are not accountants. But everyone here probably has receipts in their pockets and things like that. Everyone here could use Expensify, but only a very small subset would ever actually pay for Expensify. But anyone here could download the app, and the first question you get is basically, do you want to collect receipts from someone else? Do you want to send receipts to someone, or just hold on to them? The hold on to them case is just free. It's cool, if you want to hold on to your own receipts, that's just free forever, whatever. But most of you here probably just want to send receipts to someone else, and then you will type in their email address. And then in the process of doing so, to you, it just feels like, from a product perspective, that's cool. It's going to help me send receipts to someone else. But what we've done is we've made your receipt into a highly targeted marketing message directly to your decision maker, who has much more sophisticated needs than you. You just want to scan a receipt and get it out of your pocket.
Now, is that a totally different user experience for the recipient of those receipts? They're the approver, right?
Yeah.
So do they have to download a different app or sign up?
Same app, same experience, but I would say it's the same product, but they just use different ports of the product. And so and so everyone here is basically a lead generator. And to the point of that second audience, the second audience does pay you in something far more valuable than money. They pay you in customers. Because really, most of the money you get, you're going to turn around and spend on customer acquisition anyway. And so if you just cut out the cash portion, which is super inefficient, instead you just get direct customers from your users, that's the most efficient way to acquire customers.
But David, who is your buyer? Is it the finance department? Is it... Who is
It'd be the financial buyer. So it'd be the financial buyer would be the finance department, the accounting firm, things like this. And that's why when you submit an expense report, basically we turn you to a lead generator, and then the recipient would be like, that's cool, you got this receipt. Do you want to connect it to Workday, to your accounting package. You want to do reimbursements, actually multi-level approval flows, and all this sort of stuff. And so they introduced us to someone who honestly wasn't looking for expense reports. Like the vast majority of in fact, all of our leads come directly from the individual employees because employees freaking hate expense reports. The accountants just don't really care. They're like, yeah, I deal with it, but I've dealt with it for a long time. Like, I think it's 15 of our 16 top keywords to Expensify website include Expensify in the name. It's not like anyone's searching for expense reports. Like, everyone knows what they have. They know that they hate it, but they just think they can't do anything about it.
Does your finance buyer get bought off on paying through the free product or through the promise of like the back end integration?
It's all about the promise. And so basically, we're pulled into the organization through the employees who self-organize, and they sort of surround their IT group with torches and pitchforks, and demand Expensify get adopted. And it's the best possible salesperson is to have the individual employees champion internally.
Cool. Now Zig, you've probably been involved with one of the more complicated and quite frankly fabulous examples of a freemium product, Skype, coming in to a big business, Microsoft, and helping you drive like a huge new opportunity, namely, Skype for Business and 365. Like that kind of boggles the mind, right? Because like everyone knows the consumer Skype experience, but what was the key to leveraging that free experience into Skype for Business and 365?
Yeah, there's multiple dimensions, and it actually connects with some of the themes that you guys were just hearing. First is the brand. When Microsoft bought Skype, obviously it's a brand that everybody knows around the globe, and they know what it does. And what's important about that is even people that didn't have computers necessarily knew what Skype was because they were getting phone calls from people that were on computers, right? And today, when I left Microsoft, the Skype network is the largest, 4 times larger than any long-distance carrier in the world in terms of actual calls that are happening around the planet, which is just talk about a change too, over a 10, 15-year period.
And just
how
to be
much
clear,
things have changed.
The consumer freemium plan is simply free calls, but if you want to call to a regular phone,
then you buy credits,
Yeah.
and with credits, you could actually end up applying those credits to, not only making calls to people, but you could actually also purchase, for instance, your own number, so people could call you back depending upon what country you were in. As an example, you could buy some enhanced services, so you could, for instance, buy credits on behalf of a group of people. And so while the product was built initially to go after consumers, it actually went after people. And people that are in a whole variety of different organizations in different places. And it was the least common denominator thing, which was, I want to make a cheap phone call to somebody that is outside of my country. And then, by the way, when you started to do that, people wanted to say, well, I'm already at my computer, well, can I share something? And so you started to see desktop sharing get turned on, as an example. So the brand was a really powerful element that actually then was used to rebrand a previous product Microsoft had called Link, which is the commercial version, which is now called Skype for Business. When Skype was acquired, we rebranded a business that was, at that point in time, was well over $1 billion business. It's well over, close to $2.5 billion business now, called Skype for Business. And the inflection point happened when IT people basically said, well, you know what, all my people that are using Skype inside my company, I want them to be able to use the one I can actually have security and more governance control over. And so they started to step up to Skype for Business. Now, Skype for Business was actually integrated in with yet another suite, which is Office 365. And so that actually created this pulling effect of value that people wanted to step up to, that were higher tiers of an overall franchise of offerings that Microsoft has, which is namely Office 365. What got us there wasn't just the brand. It was also, a lot of the things you guys were just hearing a bit, which is thinking about the triggers that get people to want to step up to the next tier of value within the product experience itself. So I mentioned application sharing. On Skype, you can do application sharing, but there's a limit to how many people you can end up actually sharing to. If you want to have someone participate in a phone call, i.e. an audio conference call as part of that experience, you can't. You can't just dial into it from a telephone number, but you can in Skype for Business, as an example. If you'd like to be able to turn your entire telephone system numbers and the dialing plan onto Skype, you can't. but you can on Skype for Business, and you can actually turn off your telecommunications carrier as a
So
result.
now, how does that funnel work? Is that funneling directly from the usage patterns that you see inside an account with Skype Consumer over to the IT folks? Or are you
Yeah.
still going through the business
Well,
users?
there's a couple dimensions. I mean, first is you have to, in any freemium strategy, you have to think about the habits that you're trying to either get in the middle of or that you want to actually end up enabling over time. What are the natural things? What's the journey that you can imagine your users will end up taking, and then therefore groups of users over time will end up taking? And as they end up either populating more information into the system, or as they end up creating artifacts in the system, or enlisting others in that system, at what point in time will there be natural breakpoints if they actually aren't willing to actually start to, they aren't willing to pull out the wallet and where you start to create monetization? The Slack example is a very good example where you put enough information in there, you want to go back and search the repository or be able to pick up things, you can't unless you're willing to do it. But there's enough value that's been established in the system, right? So it's understanding the human dynamic, the group dynamic, and associating with your system as more value is created is really important. And the other dimension of it is when you're thinking about organizations, is at what point in time will someone inside that organization say, you know what, we're just going to buy it on behalf of our organization? And what are those triggering events as well?
So like, what is that with Skype for Business? What's the trigger?
So a good example, and this is something that Slack's going to have to figure out, which is what will get the IT person to want to actually turn on Slack for an entire company, as an example. Security, governance, administration, policy, and control are natural areas. And if you don't have that functionality built into the system, you're going to run up against the wall. And in fact, competitors will actually either use that to their advantage to catch up.
Are those regulatory considerations a big thing?
Depending on the market that you're
Microsoft?
in. Depending on the market
Sure.
you're in, yeah. So if you're in certain industries like financial services, government, healthcare, that's a really big deal. So.
Interesting. Hey, I know we've got a bunch of B2B people in the audience, but we've also got some consumer folks in the audience. So I want to make sure we cover some of the stuff that might really pertain to them. Jules, you've written about the freemium funnel having this range of like 1% conversion to pay all the way up to 10%. I'm just curious, that's a pretty wide range. Does that vary across industry? Like if I'm a B2C person, should I expect like a 10% conversion rate? And if I'm B2B, I should expect any insights?
I just want to invest in the 10% ones, though.
There's only
Let
a
me
few.
in, man.
What's the 10%?
There's a tough, I wish there were more
egg.
10%. No, we put 1 to 10% because those are the ranges we just have seen with freemium. And if you're at the bottom of the range, it's not great. And if you're higher, it's
You don't
a bit
invest in
better.
those
So,
companies. Okay.
so no, I mean,
So what should
if
people
there's a
shoot
10%.
for?
But what's interesting is, so consumer businesses, I think inherently, or most of them have lower conversion rates. I think a lot about like the social games where a lot of people will play, Clash of Clans, or they'll play Pokemon Go, and they'll play for free, but then there'll be a 1 or 2% of people will be massively addicted to the game, and they'll pay a bunch of money, and they call them the whales in gaming. And that's where you see kind of the lower conversion rates. The higher conversion rates are the ones where the business has probably almost constrained the value of the service, where you really can't use it, you can't fully use it until you are a paying customer. And so even with like AWS, there's not a lot of companies, most of the companies convert at some point on AWS. So I imagine their conversion rate could even be higher than 10%. So it really depends on like just thinking about very smartly about where you put the conversion triggers. To Zig's point, I mean, I met with a company which I really like, Zoom, that does video communications and
They just became a unicorn.
Reportedly, but one of the really fun things that I was talking to the CEO about is they put their trigger for, you can sign up for Zoom, you can use it for free, you can have a video conference with somebody, but you can only video conference with them for 40 minutes. And you ask the CEO, well, why?
What's the average size of a meeting?
Why 40 minutes? The average time of a meeting is about 45 to 50 minutes, right, for an enterprise. And so it's a great way to try the product. You can do it, make sure it works, do a 20-minute meeting with somebody. If you're an incredibly efficient company and you have all your meetings at 30 minutes, good on you. You can always use Zoom for free.
Whole new productivity company.
Yeah, but most companies, 45, 50 minutes is what meetings take, so sometimes an hour. So I just think that was a really smart trigger. So it feels like you're getting a lot of value, but then it actually creates a lot of
And
conversion.
this goes to the point of understanding habits.
Yeah.
It's getting into the mind of what the user's likely going to go do in their journey.
You're not going to change their meeting, timing to save a few bucks.
Yeah.
Let's go back to product design for a second. So we had this little interesting debate about, can more complicated products be sold in a freemium way? Yes, no, maybe. And it struck me in something that you said, David, that because you were basically disputing the point, like, yes, even if it's an enterprise system that's complicated and integrated and all that kind of stuff, you can make it freemium, but it seems like the key to that is going into product design with the freemium model in mind. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I would say absolutely. I think that, because if you get trapped into an enterprise sales dynamic, then it means you sort of adopt a whole bunch of assumptions around that. So if you have enterprise sales, the way you get them is that you have to charge, like, pay commissions. You're doing commissions. If you don't do clawbacks, it means you do have to contracts. If you have contracts, then you have to have this whole dynamic where everyone's always going for the next larger customer, which is just slightly higher than the customers you can support today, which means that your salespeople are always saying yes to things that you can't do, which means that your entire product roadmap is always driven towards more and more esoteric features. And once you sort of adopt this enterprise mentality, the rest of your company is completely defined. And then you're going to follow the same path of everyone else, the same economics. You're going to buy the same advertising as everyone else. You're going to be competing for the same employees as everyone else. You're just the same as everyone else. And so I would say we, from the very start, so look, we don't want to be the next Concur. We want to be something else entirely. And so the way we do that is by a completely different business model. We hire differently, we compensate differently, everything is different about us. And so I'd say it's not just about one factor of your business being freemium or whatever, it's about having an entirely different mentality about how your business operates. And I think
So what were the
key
key big trends for you that made freemium possible? So obviously mobile was a key part of it. What else was key for you?
Well, I mean, I think that the reality is our business model would have never worked had a bunch of things not happened all at the same time that no one could have predicted. Like right when we started, Apple launched the iPhone App Store. Like, who saw that coming? And then, like, when we started, actually, initially I was doing an entirely different business in prepaid debit cards, and I had no interest in doing expense reports at all. I just needed something that sounded really good, such that the banks would approve my other business. And so I'm like, expense reports. They're like, that sounds really low risk and safe and all that. So I'm like, okay, I had no intention of building it. And I launched it at TechCrunch 50, this idea, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to do expense reports. We're going to use this new thing called the iPhone, and we're going to take pictures of receipts using the camera that's built into it with this thing called an app, and it's going to be great. And we had no intention of building any of it. Because the cameras didn't work at all. They were garbage. You couldn't read the receipts, and all the stuff didn't work. And but everyone's like, wow, you can do that? That's amazing. We're like, I guess we
Not
can do
yet,
that. But maybe. And then the next year, all the phones got autofocus cameras, so now you can suddenly take really amazing photos. The whole consumerization of IT happened thanks to, I think, Apple and Dropbox and things like this. And so all these trends happened at the same time, and we're the only people just dumb enough to be out talking about this vision that we actually had no intention of doing that happened to be the thing that everyone really wanted. And so it's like, it's really worked out well. But I think it's really key is to have a deep respect for
Clinton was talking about chants.
Yeah, there we go. A lot of chanting happened there, yeah. And so I think the key is just to be drawn forward by the users who are excited about you. And it's like, look, I don't know anything about accounting. I don't know anything about expense reports. I have no interest in knowing anything about it. But you seem to like it. So just tell me what it is you think that I'm going to do, and then maybe I'll actually do that. And if you talk to enough users, and they'll say the same thing, like you're on the right path.
So, the freemium thing is still so hot, and yet also a little bit scary, as you're going into it and trying to get the economics right and the upgrade funnel path right and all that kind of stuff. But like, for example, Zig with Qualtrics, your company that you moved to Utah for, good for you. It's interesting. You look at the free account that you've got on your website, and from an outsider's point of view, it's like, oh, that seems totally brilliant, and it's fully formed, and the upgrade points are crystal clear. But is that the case, or do you have to? I mean, it seems like it would be impossible to get it right the first time.
Yeah, I don't.
So, how much do you iterate on this?
I mean, one thing I'll add to this last question that relates to this is that when you're designing, you also have to design your product to be able to do experimentation and lots of them, because you'd have no idea really what's going to actually happen, and if you can't be running experiments simultaneously often and have a system that actually allows you to be able to learn quickly from that, you're gonna have a harder time, right? And the reality is, that's how you have to build modern products anyway, right? Is just constantly be trying and seeing what works.
So that beautiful free trial or free account that we see on Qualtrics today has evolved.
We're
over time.
flighting, you know, and that's part of it, which is like, yeah, okay, you learn what your value prop is and what you're honing in on and what your trigger points are, but at the same time, you're running multiple, you know, simultaneous experiments given where you've got sources of traffic, and that then connects in with the rest of your digital marketing campaign, as an example.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, Jules, David brought up Dropbox, so I can't resist. There's kind of an interesting case study there. In the early days, Dropbox was not so cool, or was a little bit.
Dropbox is cool from the start.
Well, what did I read this correctly? That they kind of hid the freemium offer in the first.
You
No.
told me that, but I couldn't find. It might be true.
I
We only
found
invested in 2011, though.
Oh, okay. So that was before you guys got.
yeah,
in.
I'll have to ask Brian Schreier or
they,
someone from
They were
Sequoia
fully bought into freemium.
They were pretty free, but Drew, I mean, from the beginning, I mean, he had this vision around sharing and being able to access your files from anywhere, and he's got a story about, you know, not losing his thumb drive and then creating Dropbox, which I think is true. But
Does it
not as
matter?
cool as your story, but I think sometimes companies sort of back into freemium because it's the only way they can distribute their product, and they're not experts in sales, right? So I think sometimes if you have a CEO who's done sales before, it's really easy for him or her to go, okay, I got my sales playbook and I know how to generate leads and I know how to compensate salespeople. And sometimes, you know, Drew wasn't a CEO who had built a sales company, but he knew how to build products. So I think probably where the story goes, where they decided to become freemium, was that was the only way to get their product out there. And then they had to set some limit where they could figure out a way to charge people if they stored more than X amount, probably because it cost them too much, frankly.
At the time,
they had to start charging. So sometimes you sort of back into freemium. And I think the challenge for a lot of freemium companies is that, you know, a lot of freemium companies over time will start developing sales. And I think it's actually, you know, I don't think being freemium for freemium's sake is the right strategy. I think freemium is a tool, just like any other tool that you may use, television advertising or account-based marketing, whatever it is, to get you to a certain scale. Over time, you may need to experiment with different tools. And so I'm really proud that Dropbox now has a large sales organization, has really moved up market and focused on Dropbox for Business, still maintains a lot of its roots around the free product. But I think it's really healthy to sort of have that balance and have that tension. And it really just is a function of kind of where you came from. And Drew definitely wasn't a salesperson, so that's how he built Dropbox.
But the key ingredient in that story is usage. I mean, this massive balloon of usage, and then they basically had the ability to start to drop in and figure out what it would take to create the freemium model as part of that. But they started with basically co-opting a habit that was there.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, great, Scott. Where'd Scott go? Why don't we bring up the microphone here? I want to make sure we get some questions in here from the audience. I've got one here, and then if you've got one, we'll come up next.
It's on, okay. I'm lucky that I got to ask this question right as you were talking about Dropbox. I was thinking about this question before. Is there any other examples of a company that might have started out without a freemium offering, but then considering their various options and paths to monetization, chose to add freemium features to their offering? The reason I ask is because I'm doing a mobile app and I'm worried that I might lose a lot of brand loyalty if I offer a free app and then later on down the road offer a freemium offering and they go, oh, I gotta pay for this junk, I downloaded it for free 6 months ago. You know what I mean? So I'm a gamer, I'm really aware of how microtransactions have infected, for lack of a better term, the gaming industry. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. A lot of games when the App Store and gaming really started to hit, a lot of the games were paid games. And so the biggest top grossing games are ones that you paid, you know, $1.99 for or $4.99, and that shift has really happened, and a lot of companies have gone through it. The one that I work with is a company called TuneIn, which isn't a game, but it's a mobile radio app. You can listen to exclusive sports and premium content from NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. They started off as basically a free app with basically a paid version up front, and moved to where they don't really do the paid version anymore. They've got a free app, but then you can subscribe if you want some of this premium content within the app. And so I think that's always evolving around that, and not being we're this model and we'll always be this model, but really just trying to see where, we're all struggling, or at least I'm lucky to be a venture capitalist, but I'm looking at entrepreneurs. We're all struggling to
You
get
empathetically
traction.
struggle, right?
No, but I want them to because I want to fund them, and I'm like, they're like, and it's just this fight, to try to get traction in a world where resources are scarce and talent's hard to get and capital's hard to get, and so just experimenting, trying everything, whatever, clawing your way to get to scale. I mean, that's really what it
Qualtrics
takes.
is an interesting example of this as well, where, it was a paid product, and yet there's free product available as well as a way to be able to just expand the market, right? And simply by looking at the meters that you have available in your product a little differently, right? So if you do for example, if you do a survey, you'll get less number of responses if you start with the free part, right? But, that still preserves the premium product, and it gives a lot of optionality that's available.
So Qualtrics backed into the freemium model. They didn't come out the chute with the freemium model.
I don't believe it did immediately, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
Also, I'd say I wouldn't be too afraid of charging. I know that when we started, actually, so because we didn't intend to build our product, and then people were excited about it, and we didn't have any cost. It was just like me and my buddy, and so we found that actually the top reason that people wouldn't use Expensify was because it was free. And they're like, oh, this creeps me out. It's like, are you just going to go out of business? It's like, and we're like,
I'm a finance guy. I can't do something unless I pay for
But
it.
we're like actually importing people's bank accounts. And so it's like, okay, you're taking the username and password to my bank account and you're charging me nothing. Are you just stealing my money? Is that the plan? And so actually we started charging because it was the greatest barrier to adoption. And once we started charging, we saw adoption actually increase dramatically. And so I'd say actually by putting a price tag on it, and putting a good price tag on it, people feel good about the purchase if they care about it.
I think we had another question up at the front here. Yes, sir? Scott, come on up with the mic.
So, quick question. If you were talking, Hebrew brought up games and stuff. So, would it be a good idea, bad idea, if you had a game and you were limited not by how much you could play or anything, but through the natural progression of the game, you were limited by what you can what kind of gear and stuff you can get, while the AI is not. So eventually they'll get to a point where they can just kill you all the time because they got this stuff, but you can't unless you upgrade. So would you think that's a good idea? Not a good idea.
I think that the challenge with ideas is that the difference between a good idea and a bad idea is only visible in the rearview mirror. And I think, in fact, the better the idea, the worse it must seem on the surface. Because if it just seemed obviously like a good idea, someone would do it, and it'd just be done. It'd just be the thing that everyone does. And so if it's a good idea, it must look terrible because that's the only reason no one else has done it before. And so the worse it sounds, the better it might be. Good. Of course, the worse it sounds, it probably also is terrible too. And that's why it's a challenge with ideas. And so it's like, I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, and or even could know the answer to it until they just give it a shot.
Take a chance. I think we had
Experiment.
Any other questions around the room? We got the middle section right here, all with the questions.
So the clock starts ticking once someone joins into a freemium plan. Is there special timing in when to start pushing someone towards actually paying afterwards? And does that change by industry?
What do you mean the clock is ticking, just to clarify?
Yeah, so you spent a lot of time, energy, and money to get people even to your platform in the first place, to use the product, and once they've started using it for free, how long does that individual use that thing for free? Maybe it's a year before they actually start becoming a paid customer.
That presumes
Maybe
that
they're a day.
your only metric or meter is time, right? I mean, what are they doing when they're inside the product, right? So are there value points that they want to open up that are not available to them, right? That you've sort of closed the door on unless they actually take out a credit card as an example, right? So time is just one dimension that you can choose to use. I mean, you could say, let's use the Slack example. Hey, open up the entire product, and then 1 year from now, boom, people are going to have to start paying. And that you could say, will that drive the right kind of habit and approach? Because people start using it, it might be an idea for them. Or instead, what they chose to do was it's limited to number of users, or there are certain features that are not available unless it's open. So
Yeah, and I think the idea that I'm trying to share is maybe we, as a company, you have a personal goal. Is we want to convert our customers within 6 months to start paying, but maybe to the customer, there are metrics and values that they have. Maybe they want to have a whole team on their Slack channel or whatever it is. Is there an industry standard for when people should start converting from free to paid?
So I mean, we looked at a lot of the data, right? And most of the best companies, they have people that actually convert to paid within the first month, right? So it'd be very unusual, and not, you take sort of a cohort of people that join. There's people that can, if you're not converting people within the first month because they're really active power users, that usually is a sign that there's a problem. If you should also be converting people sometimes a year or 2 years later because they finally get to the scale where they are doing that activity to sort of what Zig said that converts them. So I think it's sort of all of the above. They should be converting at different people should be converting
Even
at
in
different
that 30
times.
days, the biggest conversion factor that's important is, do you actually start to see them doing what you were hoping they would do in your product?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, but
and
I
how
would-
long did it take them to do it, right? Or did you get in their way because of the way that you put the product in front of them?
Yeah, and likewise, don't give up on them. Like we have every month we sign up customers that are like uniformly distributed across the ages back 8 years. And so every month we'll get like customers that signed up 8 years ago or signed up like this month. And so I think that and what's nice about that is you're building up this huge reservoir of millions of users that basically are constantly just giving you new customers every single month, which makes for very sort of stable metrics, and everything's just very smooth, like this giant flywheel.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. But thanks for coming, and please give it up for this amazing group up here, up on stage. Come up afterwards and